This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. So yesterday, Meghan and Harry had to insert themselves again to make themselves feel relevant in issuing a statement on Farswell, indicating that they have had so much interaction with the families of those that were hurt by social media and alerting the world that part of this congressional hearing happening today is part of the work that they have been doing. Knowing that these two are so dirty, we know that there is an alternative agenda that they are pursuing, which I have outlined several times over about the censorship and undermining people's free speech here in America. So, yesterday on Capitol Hill, the Senate held a congressional hearing with the CEO of Facebook, the one and only evil Mark Zuckerberg, Linda Yaccarino, who's now the CEO or president of X. We also had the CEO of Discord, Snapchat, and TikTok. So these executives were put in the hot seat yesterday around liability that their platforms are free from, such as content that is dangerous and harmful to children, as well as new regulations that the Senate wants to pass into legislative law. So let's quickly talk about the members of this Senate Judiciary Committee. So you have both parties representing, with the majority being the Democrats. So from the Democrat side, you have Sheldon Whitehouse, Amy Klobuchar, Chris Coons. Now, I put a red square around him because he is aligned with Prince Harry. Richard Blumenthal, Mazie Hirono, Cory Booker, Alex Padilla, which I put another red square around it because the Harkles are aligned with this guy. John Ossoff, Peter Welch, and LaFonza Butler. I also put another red square around her because that was the seat that Dianne Feinstein has. So for the minority members, who are the Republicans with 9 seats here, we have Chuck Grassley, where I put a green square around him because there's some things that he has supported and advocated for that I am in support of. John Cornyn, Mike Lee. Then there's Ted Cruz, where I put a green square around him because he has been a real advocate in supporting the American people around this border crisis. Also, I'm a big supporter of Josh Hawley. I don't know Tom Cotton. John Kennedy is also another favorite of mine. Tom Hillis, I don't know about. And I put a square around Marsha Blackburn because she has been very vocal about getting the names of Sleazy E's client list so they could be prosecuted. She has been championing this fight. And yeah, I mean, I think she is a strong advocate for fighting against the abuses that we're seeing going on with these children, especially the ones that are being trafficked on a daily basis here in the United States. At the head of this committee is Democrat Mr. Durbin, who I can't say very much about his policies or his time in Congress, so I will just say it's neutral. And then you have Lindsey Graham, who is the Republican ranking member, who I'm just going to say I'm not a fan, nor do I trust him based on what I've seen.
Thank you, Mr. Citron. You said we need to start a discussion. Be honest with you, we've been having this discussion for a very long time. We need to get a result, not a discussion. Do you agree with that?
Ranking member, I agree this is an issue that we've also been very focused on since we started our company in 2015, but this is the first time.
Are you familiar with the Earn It Act, authored by myself and Senator Blumenthal?
So I'm going to pause right there. The Earn It Act really is about surveilling of the kids and their communications and enforcing or championing for breaking encryption. This is my opinion, but Lindsey Graham is a warmonger. He wants the war to continue in Ukraine, as well as he wants this war to happen with Iran, and he has been stoking the fire. Both sides of the aisle, to some degree, want some type of control of the information flow. In my perspective, I see Lindsey Graham wanting to be able to have surveillance on the American people, especially when it comes to war times and what's being said, because we all know that there's a lot of propaganda being pushed out there for both the war in Israel as well as the war in Ukraine.
A little bit, yes.
Okay, or do you support that? Like yes or no?
We're not prepared to support it today, but we believe that section...
Do you support the CSAM Act?
The Stop CSAM Act, we are not prepared to support today.
Okay.
But we
do you
think
support the SHIELD Act?
We believe that the cyber tip line.
Do you support it, yes or no?
We believe that the cyber tip line and NECMEC.
I'll tell you that to be no. The Project Safe Childhood Act, do you support it?
We believe that.
I'll take that to be no. The Report Act, do you support it?
Ranking Member Graham, we very much look forward to having conversations with you and your team. We
Well,
want
I
to
look
be part
forward
of the
to
solution.
passing a bill that will solve the problem. Do you support removing Section 230 liability protections for social media companies?
I believe that Section 230 needs to be updated. It's a very old law.
Do you support repealing it so people can sue if they believe they're harmed?
I think that Section 230, as written, while it has many downsides, has enabled innovation on the internet, which I think has largely been.
Thank you very much. So here you are. You got. If you're waiting on these guys to solve the problem, we're going to die waiting. Mr. Zuckerberg, the representative from South Carolina, Mr. Guffey's son, got caught up in a sex extortion ring in Nigeria using Instagram. He was shaken down, paid money. That wasn't enough, and he killed himself using Instagram. What would you like to say to him?
It's terrible. I mean, no one should have to go through something like that.
Do you think he should be allowed to sue you?
I think that they can sue us.
Well, I think he should, and he can't. So the bottom line here, folks, is that this committee is done with talking. We passed 5 bills unanimously that in their different ways, and look at who did this. Graham Blumenthal, Durbin Hawley, Klobuchar Cornyn, Klobuchar, Blackburn, and Ossoff. I mean, we've found common ground here that just is astonishing. And we've had hearing after hearing, Mr. Chairman, and the bottom line is I've come to conclude, gentlemen, that you're not going to support any of this. Linda, how you say your last name?
Yacarino.
Do you support the Earn It Act?
We strongly support the collaboration to raise industry practices to
Do you support the Earn
prevent
It Act?
CSAM.
Do you support the Earn It? In English, do you support the Earn It Act? Yes or no? We don't need double speak
We
here.
look forward to supporting and continue our conversations.
Okay, so I'll
as
take
you
that
can
as no.
see,
But you have taken the reason the Earn It Act is important. You can actually lose your liability protections when children are exploited and you didn't use best business practices. See, the Earn It Act means you have to earn liability protection. You're given it no matter what you do. So to the members of this committee, it is now time to make sure that the people who are holding up the signs can sue on behalf of their loved ones. Nothing will change until the courtroom door is open to victims of social media.
So for several years now, the government has been trying to revoke Section 230, which is essentially the get out of jail free card for these tech platforms for hosting certain things on it that could be deemed harmful and dangerous, as well as so-called misinformation. We saw a push with the Trump administration, and we're seeing a stronger push here now with the Biden administration. In my humble opinion, I don't see Section 230 going anywhere. In fact, after reading the Missouri versus Biden and understanding that these politicians use Section 230 as this continuing threat over these tech platforms to do what they want, it is something that they recognize, knows that these tech companies need it in order to keep this free market society going, or at least keeping business going and making money. If they took away Section 230, that would stifle free speech. It would make these platforms more weary to put certain types of content onto their platform, thus limiting growth. Make no mistake, these politicians serve the elite. And to take away Section 230 will be taking money out of the pockets of these tech companies, the very same tech companies who fund many campaigns.
Last, Mr. Zuckerberg, in 2021, the Wall Street Journal reported on internal Meta research documents asking why do we care about tweens? These were internal documents. I'm quoting the documents. And answering its own question by citing Meta internal emails. They are a valuable but untapped audience. At a commerce hearing, I'm also on that committee, I asked Meta's head of global safety why children aged 10 to 12 are so valuable to Meta. She responded, "We do not knowingly attempt to recruit people who aren't old enough to use our apps." Well, when the 42 state attorneys general, Democrat and Republican, brought their case, they said this statement was inaccurate. Few examples. In 2021, she received an email, Ms. Davis, from Instagram's research director saying that Instagram is investing in experiencing targeting young age roughly 10 to 12. In a February 2021 instant message, one of your employees wrote that Meta is working to recruit Gen Alpha before they reach teenage years. A 2018 email that circulated inside Meta says that you were briefed that children under 13 will be critical for increasing the rate of acquisition when users turn 13.
You see, these tech giants understand that the impressionable youth are the ones that are going to be the customers of tomorrow. Obama understood this in his campaigning when he used Facebook to target a younger generation, knowing that it was going to go for the full 8 years. So the goal is to get these kids hooked. And when you talk about Tristan, who has talked about so many times over that these platforms are designed to do that psychologically. Now, remember Meghan and Harry had went to Stanford and they were talking to many people who were specialists in the neuroscience and how the brain works. Meghan and Harry know the art of manipulation, and it should be no surprise to anyone that they choose to talk to and work with, and I want to say groom, because they are very much predators, the younger generation. Notice that all their projects involve the youth, the impressionable youth, I might say. Whenever I see Meghan and Harry talk about children's safety, I shudder because I know that they are preying on those parents that lost their children as well as the children themselves. It's like so alarming to me that people are still entertaining these two. Children should be kept far away from Meghan and Harry.
Explain that with what I heard at that testimony at the Commerce hearing, that they weren't being targeted. And I just ask again, as the other witnesses were asked, why your company does not support the Stop CSAM Act or the SHIELD Act.
Sure, Senator. I'm happy to talk to both of those. We had discussions internally about whether we should build a kids version of Instagram, like the kids versions of YouTube and other services. We haven't actually moved forward with that, and we currently have no plans to do so. So I can't speak directly to the exact emails that you cited, but it sounds to me like they were deliberations around a project that people internally thought was important and we didn't end up moving forward with.
How about Facebook just outright ban children from using the platform and leave it to the parents to take care of their children? I mean, if parents were doing their job, they would restrict use of the internet in some way. They should be monitoring their activity online. I mean, the excuse of parents now saying, oh, it's too complex. Well, you know what? These are your children. You should be invested in learning how to protect them. It shouldn't be the government's job to do it. I mean, if parents need resources to learn, how about investing in that and help the parents learn how to better monitor their children's online activity? Now, here's where the Trojan horse slips in. So Zuckerberg doesn't want to take on any liability for any mess that happens on his platform, but he wants to be able to seem like he's playing the game with these guys and making the suggestion now for Apple and Google to be taking information of the parents and storing it.
Sure. So overall, I mean, my position on the bills is I agree with the goal of all of them. There are most things that I agree with within them. There are specific things that I would probably do differently. We also have our own legislative proposal for what we think would be most effective in terms of helping the internet in the various companies give parents control over the experience. So I'm happy to go into the detail on any one of them, but ultimately, I mean, I think that this
I think these parents will tell you that this stuff hasn't worked to just give parents control. They don't know what to do. It's very, very hard, and that's why we are coming up with other solutions that we think are much more helpful to law enforcement, but also this idea of finally getting something going on liability. Because I just believe with all the resources you have, that you actually would be able to do more than you're doing, or these parents would be sitting behind you right now in this Senate hearing room.
I don't think that parents should have to upload an ID or prove that they're the parent of a child in every single app that their children use. I think the right place to do this, and a place where it would be actually very easy for it to work, is within the app stores themselves, where my understanding is Apple and Google already, or at least Apple, already requires parental consent when a child does a payment with an app. So it should be pretty trivial to pass a law that requires them to make it so that parents have control anytime a child downloads an app.
So now do you see this Trojan horse? They want the data of the people. And in order to do that, they need to bypass the privacy laws. And this is how they're going to do it.
And offers consent of that. And the research that we've done shows that the vast majority of parents want that. And I think that that's the type of legislation, in addition to some of the other ideas that you all have, that would make this a lot easier for parents.
Just to be clear, I remember one mom telling me, with all these things she could maybe do that she can't figure out, it's like a faucet overflowing in a sink, and she's out there with a mop while her kids are getting addicted to more and more different apps and being exposed to material. We've got to make this simpler for parents so they can protect their kids, and I just don't think this is going to be the way to do it. I think the answer is what Senator Graham has been talking about, which is opening up the halls of the courtroom so that puts it on you guys to protect these parents and protect these kids, and then also to pass some of these laws that makes it easier for law enforcement.
Now, you heard what the senator said. They want to put liability onto these tech platforms, but they also have all these bills that they want to get passed into regulation and law. And you can see Zuckerberg is putting the ownership onto the parents as the ones who want these laws put into place, fully knowing that it means more data for their company to manipulate and target in order to make money. At the end of the day, this is always about money. Now, I've learned from these two evil monsters that they don't do anything unless there's something in it for them. This has always been getting access to data and being able to exploit it, whether it be to weaponize the media as well as target people in order to sway them in whatever ideology or money-making idea that these two have in order to prey off of vulnerable human beings. For Meghan and Harry, this has always been about information flow control, and the fact that they could not control the internet and what people were saying in debunking their lies fueled this obsession to go after the First Amendment to get it shut down. This is what we're seeing. And the fact that it didn't work the first time around, as Harry and Meghan, Harry mostly, had been a part of the censorship industrial complex, the other way in now is to go after the safety of the children and use that again as the Trojan horse to get in to invade people's privacy and American First Amendment rights. This push by the Democrats, it's all about the data and transparency. The more data that they have, the more that they can figure out how to manipulate the American people.
Consumer protection. When there is some new technology, we put in place regulations to make sure that it is not overly harmful. As my friend Senator Klobuchar pointed out, one door flew off of one plane, no one was hurt, and yet the entire Boeing fleet of that type of plane was grounded, and a federal fit-for-purpose agency did an immediate safety review. I'm going to point not to the other pieces of legislation that I think are urgent that we take up and pass, but to the core question of transparency. If you're a company manufacturing a product that is allegedly addictive and harmful, one of the first things we look to is safety information. We try to give our constituents, our consumers, warnings, labels that help them understand what are the consequences of this product and how to use it safely or not. As you've heard pointedly from some of my colleagues, if you sell an addictive, defective, harmful product in this country in violation of regulations and warnings, you get sued. And what is distinct about platforms as an industry is most of the families who are here because there were not sufficient warnings and they cannot effectively sue you. So let me dig in for a moment if I can, because each of your companies voluntarily discloses information about the content and the safety investments you make and the actions you take. There was a question pressed, I think it was by Senator Graham earlier, about TikTok. I believe, Mr. Chu, you said invest $2 billion in safety. My background memo said your global revenue is $85 billion. Mr. Zuckerberg, my background memo says you're investing $5 billion in safety in Meta, and your annual revenue is on the order of $116 billion. So what matters, you can hear some expressions from the parents in the audience, what matters is the relative numbers and the absolute numbers. Your data folks, if there's anybody in this world who understand data, it's you guys. So I want to walk through whether or not these voluntary measures of disclosure of content and harm are sufficient. Because I would argue we're here because they're not. Without better information, how can policymakers know whether the protections you've testified about, the new initiatives, the starting programs, the monitoring, and the takedowns are actually working? How can we understand meaningfully how big these problems are without measuring and reporting data? Mr. Zuckerberg, your testimony referenced a National Academy of Sciences study that said at the population level, there is no proof about harm for mental health. Well, it may not be at the population level, but I'm looking at a room full of hundreds of parents who have lost children. And our challenge is to take the data and to make good decisions about protecting families and children from harm. So let me ask about what your companies do or don't report. And I'm going to particularly focus on your content policies around self-harm. And I'm just going to ask a series of yes or no questions. And what I'm getting at is, do you disclose enough? Mr. Zuckerberg, from your policies prohibiting content about self-harm, do you report an estimate of the total amount of content, not a percentage of the overall, not a prevalence number, but the total amount of content on your platform that violates this policy? And do you report the total number of views that self-harm that violates this policy gets on your platform?
Yes, Senator. We pioneered quarterly reporting on our community standards enforcement across all these different categories of harmful content. We focus on prevalence, which you mentioned, because what we're focused on is what % of the content that we take down.
So, Mr. Zuckerberg, I'm going to interrupt you, and you're very talented. I have very little time left. I'm trying to get an answer to a question. Not as a percentage of the total, because remember, it's a huge number, so the percentage is small. But do you report the actual amount of content and the amount of views self-harm content received?
No, I believe we focus on prevalence.
Correct. You don't. Ms. Yacarina, yes or no? You report it or you don't?
Senator, as a reminder, we have less than 1% of our users that are between the ages of 13 and 17.
Do you report the absolute number of how many images and how often viewed?
Posts and accounts that we've taken down in 2023.
Yes.
We've taken over almost 1 million posts down that in regards to mental health and self-harm.
Mr. Chu, do you disclose the number of appearances of these types of content and how many are viewed before they're taken down?
Senator, we disclose the number we take down based on each category of violation and how many of that were taken down proactively before it was reported.
Mr. Spiegel?
Yes, Senator, we do disclose.
Mr. Citron?
Yes, we do.
So I've got 3 more questions I'd love to walk through if I had unlimited time. I will submit them for the record. The larger point is that platforms need to hand over more content about how the algorithms work, what the content does, and what the consequences are. Not at the aggregate, not at the population level, but the actual numbers of cases so we can understand the content. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I have a bipartisan bill, the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act, co-sponsored by Senators Cornyn, Klobuchar, Blumenthal on this committee and Senator Cassidy and others. It's in front of the Commerce Committee, not this committee. But it would set reasonable standards for disclosure and transparency to make sure that we're doing our jobs based on data. Yes, there's a lot of emotion in this field, understandably. But if we're going to legislate responsibly about the management of the content on your platforms, we need to have better data. Is there any one of you willing to say now that you support this bill? Mr. Chairman, let the record reflect a yawning silence from the leaders of the social media platforms. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Coons. We're on the first of two roll calls, and so please understand if some of the members leave and come back, it's no disrespect. They're doing their job.
Just so you know, Stanford University, the university that Renee DiResta is a researcher at, the same woman who is former CIA, is backing this bill and have supported it. Some of the features of the legislation is about allowing the researchers access to privacy information, data. This is something that Renee DiResta, Harry, Meghan, all those part of this censorship industrial complex who had been censoring Americans want to have. Again, another Trojan horse. And here we have Chris Coons, who been posing with Prince Harry in African parks. Does he know about the abuses that are going there? Maybe we should write to him and tell him to tell Congress to halt funding to this African parks because of the human rights abuses going on, being that he's so caring about protecting people. I find it so hard to trust these people. Anyone that is even a degree touching Meghan and Harry, you have to be suspect of. And the fact that this guy is pushing this particular legislation and has been aligned with Meghan and Harry and all those other folks in this censorship industrial complex, it makes you wonder. It makes you question, what are the real motives? Because currently, right now, there's a ton of stuff that could be done around all of these problems. But for whatever reason, nobody's doing anything. And you can't really put all of the blame on the tech companies for a lot of the really horrific stuff that is happening in society. We have so many elites who are part of abusing others. And when I say abusing others, we're talking about underage people. We talk about the sleazy E situation. I mean, Democrats are the last people to be talking about trying to help children, if you know what I mean. What concerns me the most is you put these laws in place. Are they necessarily going to be enforced? Because you have Department of Justice, you've got corrupt divisions of government involved here that could easily look the other way, like how they've been looking the other way about other things.
Thank you.
I know both of them.
That was good enough.
Now, this next Democrat is the one responsible for the kids' online safety bill that is trying to get passed through the Senate. I have deep concerns in what I'm seeing being requested here. This goes back to the whole third party getting access to your data.
Mr. Zuckerberg, you know who Antigone Davis is, correct?
Yes.
She's one of your top leaders. In September of 2021, she was global head of safety, correct?
Yes.
And you know that she came before a subcommittee of the Commerce Committee that I chaired at the time, Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, correct?
Yes.
And she was testifying on behalf of Facebook, right?
Meta, but yes.
It was then Facebook, but Meta now. And she told us, and I'm quoting, Facebook is committed to building better products for young people and to doing everything we can to protect their privacy, safety, and well-being on our platforms. And she also said, kids' safety is an area where, quote, we are investing heavily, end quote. We now know that statement was untrue. We know it from an internal email that we have received. It's an email written by Nick Clegg. You know who he is, correct?
Yes.
He was Meta's president of global affairs, and he wrote a memo to you, which you received, correct? It was written to you.
So I can't see the email, but sure, I'll assume that you got that correct.
And he summarized Facebook's problems. He said, quote, we are not on track to succeed for our core well-being topics. problematic use, bullying and harassment, connections, and SSI, meaning suicidal self-injury.
I'd like to remind everyone, but Nick Clegg came up in the Twitter files around colluding with the government on censorship of American free speech. Now, he was very much questioning the free speech aspect of it for what they were doing and what the government was asking them to do, but he still went along with it anyway.
He said also in another memo, quote, "We need to do more and we are being held back by a lack of investment." This memo has the date of August 28th, just weeks before that testimony from Antigone Davis, correct?
Sorry, Senator, I'm not sure what the date of the testimony was.
Well, those are the dates on the emails. Nick Clegg was asking you, pleading with you for resources to back up the narrative, to fulfill the commitments. In effect, Antigone Davis was making promises that Nick Clegg was trying to fulfill, and you rejected that request for 45 to 84 engineers to do well-being or safety. We know that you rejected it from another memo, Nick Clegg's assistant, Tim Colburn.
I would just like to interject that in 2021 was the height of this censorship that was going on the social media platforms, including the focus on COVID and wellness and health. So, yeah, right now he needs resources to do what the government has been pressuring them to do.
Nick did email Mark, referring to that earlier email, to emphasize his support for the package, but it lost out to the various other pressures and priorities. We've done a calculation that those potentially 84 engineers would have cost Meta about $50 million in a quarter when it earned $9.2 billion. And yet it failed to make that commitment in real terms, and you rejected that request because of other pressures and priorities. That is an example.
So here's the thing. What was driving the uptick in this trend that they were seeing? It was obviously being done by these groups, lobbyists like the CCDH, the Center for Digital Hate, with this campaign that Meghan and Harry had supported, Stop Hate for Profit. So yes, the situation around advertising and losing companies being on the platform because they were supporting this campaign that was being pushed by this movement was taking a toll onto the company. So I'm sure Zuckerberg had his reasons for saying, you know what, we don't need the additional 84, but this is what the manipulation looks like with these Democrats.
From your own internal document of failing to act, and it is the reason why we can no longer trust Meta and, frankly, any of the other social media to, in effect, grade their own homework. The public, and particularly the parents in this room, know that we can no longer rely on social media to provide the kind of safeguards that children and parents deserve. And that is the reason why passing the Kids Online Safety Act is so critically important.
Let's stop and talk about this, shall we? In this act or new legislation that they want to pass, Section 5, disclosure, Section 6, transparency, Section 7, independent research, Section 8, market research, Section 9, age verification study and report. Does that not scream, hey, we need to invade people's privacy? Before I get into showing you how invasive this is, let me show you who the council are supporting this kids' online safety bill and who had been lobbying and advocating for it. Tell me if you recognize any of the names. Yep, that's Jory Craig, the consultant that Meghan and Harry paid over $120,000. Renee DiResta, we know about Renee DiResta. By the way, both these people are listed in the lawsuit in Missouri versus Biden for censorship. Next, we have former editor of Time Magazine. You know, Time Magazine, the one that gave the cover to Meghan and Harry for being, I don't know, something. We have former CIA on here, Secretary of Defense. Then we have Meghan's good friend, Tristan. Some notable ones, we have former member of Homeland Security, you know, the department that's failing us on all cylinders, allowing so many migrants into this land. And we have ex-CIA again. Why do we have so many CIA people on here? But this last one, I think, should wake everybody up. Vivian Schiller, a woman who has a shady past and is the executive director of Aspen Digital. Yes, the same Aspen Digital that hired Harry to be on the Aspen Commission of Information Disorder. Also, this woman was ahead and aware of this tabletop exercise being held to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story. She's currently now, or the organization is now currently being sued in the Missouri versus Biden. So, folks, I don't know about you, anything being put forward with these folks involved, we need to scrutinize it, as well as if Meghan and Harry are a part of it, which clearly they are since they broadcasted this on their webpage. We need to stay away from it because what this is another attempt to censor Americans. I can't explain this anymore. I mean, they did this during the 2020 election. They did this when COVID was going on. They were the ones playing God with people. And I think that the shit situation that this country's in right now is a result of these people who had been manipulating these platforms and getting people taken down. Had we knew about this Hunter Biden laptop, a story that was purposely suppressed, the situation would be different. So in this Kids Online Safety Act, here are the parts that matter. So out of 30 pages of this bill, from pages 3 to 10 are about the parents and the kids and the tools available to them for safeguarding. But from 11 on to 30, it's about transparency, data sharing, independent research, audits, risk assessments. But where I want to take your attention to is around privacy. So in this, they say that they're requesting or requiring these tech companies to conduct research based on experiences of minors covered on the platform, to take into account the research, including research regarding system design features, marketing, or product integrity. Then they go into the privacy safeguards. In issuing the public reports required under this section, a covered platform shall take steps to safeguard the privacy of its users, including ensuring that data is presented in a de-anonymized aggregated format. But here we go. They also want independent research done. And this is where the Renee DiRestas and Jory Craigs step in, because this is what they have been screaming about. The term Assistant Secretary means the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information. So who might that be? That would be Alan Davidson. And I don't know if it concerns you, but it concerns me that he is a contributor to the World Economic Forum. In my personal opinion, I think anyone who's related to our government should be barred if they are part of this World Economic Forum. Anyhow, continuing on, they go through talking about eligible researcher, talking about the term eligible researcher means an individual or group of individuals affiliated with or employed by an institution of higher education like Stanford, or we have a nonprofit organization, including any organization described in Section 501C of the Internal Revenue Code, like Jory Craig's ISD organization. Program, the term program means program established under subsection, which is this research. Now, this is where it gets creepy, in my opinion. It is the assistant secretary who is the one that chooses and sort of scouts for these researchers that are supposed to be qualified. So this Alan Davidson, who is a member of the WEF, who's currently this assistant secretary, is going to be the one to establish a program under which an eligible researcher may apply for. And a covered platform shall provide access to data assets from the covered platform for the sole purpose of conducting public interest research regarding harms to the safety and well-being of minors, including matters described in Section 3B. Now, I don't know how parents would feel about this, but you have a stranger given access to assets. And when they say data assets, that could be anything that is on the platform. So let's say, for instance, you have a child that has suffered some type of eating disorder, right? And as a consequence, they end up passing away, but there are photos online that were flagged and taken down, but they're stored on whatever server of this social media platform. How would you feel if you had researchers who were picked by this assistant secretary? Just take, for example, Meghan Markle is chosen as a researcher because she is aligned with Jory Craig, right? And they're doing a research project for Archwell, like what they did with preying off of these poor parents. Can you imagine if Meghan Markle had access to your child's data on severe ED and taking that information to use it in her, I want to say, advancement in her, whatever she's trying to do in life? You would be absolutely livid. I know I would. Like, I don't want this woman anywhere near advising or influencing or pushing for legislation. But this is what these people are doing right now. And being that it's these kind of people who are behind pushing to get this access to having data and skirting the Fourth Amendment, I wouldn't trust them to have any kind of information on people on these platforms. But anyhow, in my opinion, I think this gets worse. So duties and rights of covered platforms, access to data assets in general. If the assistant secretary, aka Alan Davidson, approves an application under paragraph 1 with respect to a covered platform, the covered platform shall, in a timely manner, provide the qualified researcher with access to data assets necessary to conduct public interest research described in the paragraph. So here you go, keys to the kingdom, researcher, Meghan Markle. The form of access? A covered platform shall provide to a qualified researcher access to data assets under Clause I through online databases, application programming interfaces or APIs, and data files as appropriate for the qualified researcher to undertake public interest research. This clause sounds a little generic. I mean, with people like Renee DiResta out there who want to have more access to invading people's privacy because they feel that you need to give up your privacy and they are the ones to tell you how you should think and what you can say and what you can do. This does make me feel a little uncomfortable for the parents. And this next part of the bill is crazy to me, where it says non-disclosure agreement. A covered platform may require, as a condition of access to the data assets of the covered platform, that a qualified researcher enter into a non-disclosure agreement regarding the release of data assets, provided that the agreement does not restrict the publication of the qualified researcher's findings, and the terms of the agreement allow the qualified researcher to provide the original agreement or a copy of the agreement to the assistant secretary. This is so nuts to me because it's the assistant secretary who is the one who's holding down the law. So a platform can appeal. It says a covered platform may appeal the granting of an application under paragraph 1 on the grounds that the assistant secretary shall grant such appeal if the covered platform does not have access to the requested data assets, or providing access to data assets will lead to significant vulnerabilities in the security of the covered platform services. So you might be saying to yourself, well, how come they're only trying to protect the platform itself? What about the users? Good question. So here's what they say about the duty of confidentiality. To protect user privacy, a qualified researcher shall have a duty of confidentiality with respect to data assets provided by a covered platform, which may be defined by the Assistant Secretary. Federal agencies, nothing in this subsection shall be construed to authorize a federal agency to seek access to the data of a covered platform through the program. Well, hold on a second. Okay, they might not be able to go through and get this information directly, but couldn't they go to the independent third-party researcher and get it? There's no stipulation about that. And then they say for a safe harbor for independent collection, with respect to public interest research conducted regarding harms to minors, including matters described in Section 3B, no cause of action related to terms of service violations undertaking while collecting data assets in the course of such research shall lie or be maintained in any court against the researcher conducting the research. Now, how comfortable do you feel seeing that no consequences will come to this researcher should, let's say, this data somehow get put out there in a manner that maybe somebody doesn't like? Like, let's say if you are the parent of this person who was bullied or who had like an ED and there was like statistics around it, such as like profile name, other friends connection, whatever. The data is the data, and how they want to use it apparently is their choice. What concerns me is like you have people like Meghan Markle who will take this information and use it however they want to exploit people in order to advance themselves, whether it be for political gain, whether it be for monetary gain, and nothing can happen to them. I don't feel too comfortable seeing this, especially with the people who are backing and lobbying for this stuff. It's the same people who are the ones that were censoring others in the election, as well as in 2021 around the vaccine. And we know that Meghan and Harry were doing it too. No, I don't want them influencing anyone. I don't want them near children because they have been extremely dangerous and 100% predators.
Mr. Zuckerberg, do you believe that you have a constitutional right to lie to Congress?
Senator, no, but I mean,
well, let me just clarify for you.
I mean, I'd like the opportunity
let me
to
just
respond
clarify
to
for you. In a lawsuit brought by hundreds of parents, some in this very room, alleging that you made false and misleading statements concerning the safety of your platform for children, you argued in not just one pleading, but twice, in December and then in January, that you have a constitutional right to lie to Congress. Do you disavow that filing in court?
Senator, I don't know what filing you're talking about, but I testified honestly and truthfully, and I would like the opportunity to respond to the previous things that you showed as well.
Well, I have a few more questions.
Not only was this part manipulative, but it was unfair to Mark Zuckerberg. He never said to Congress that he felt he had a constitutional right to lie. He never said that. So to not give him the opportunity to respond or to defend himself, I feel was a pretty jerk thing to do by this congressman. He really just cares about this Kids Online Safety Act that he wants to push so he can get these researchers in to be able to gather this data. Again, birds of a feather flock together. This guy's no different.
And let me ask others who are here, because I think it's important to put you on record, who will support the Kids Online Safety Act? Yes or no? Mr. Citron?
There are parts of the act that we think are great.
No, it's a yes or no question. I'm going to be running out of time, so I'm assuming the answer is no if you can't answer yes.
We very much think that the national privacy standard would be great.
Mr. Siegel?
Senator, we strongly support the Kids Online Safety Act, and we've already implemented many of its core provisions.
Thank you. I welcome that support, along with Microsoft's support. Mr. Chu?
Senator, with some changes, we can support it.
Well, in its present form, do you support it? Yes or no?
We are aware that some groups have raised some concerns. It's important to understand
I'll take that as a no. Ms. Yaccarino?
Senator, we support COSA and will continue to make sure that it accelerates and make sure it continues to offer community for teens that are seeking that voice.
Mr. Zuckerberg?
Senator, we support the age-appropriate content standards, but would have some suggestions
yes or no,
on how to
Mr.
implement
Zuckerberg? Do you support the Kids Online Safety Act.
Senator,
it's a
I think
measure
these are
that is
nuanced
public,
things.
and I'm just asking whether you'll support it or not.
These are nuanced things. I think that the basic spirit is right. I think the basic ideas in it are right, and there are some ideas that I would debate how to best
Okay,
implement them.
unfortunately, I don't think we can count on social media as a group or big tech to support this measure. And in the past, we know it's been opposed by armies of lawyers and lobbyists. We're prepared for this fight, but I am very, very glad that we have parents here, because tomorrow we're going to have an advocacy day. And the folks who really count, the people in this room who support this measure, are going to be going to their representatives and their senators, and their voices and faces are going to make a difference. Senator Schumer has committed that he will work with me to bring this bill to a vote. And then we will have real protection for children and parents online. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I know I've been super critical in this video, but I think I have every right to, considering we have watched Meghan Markle and everything that Meghan and Harry have touched have been corrupted in some way. And we know that currently right now, this current administration, we can't really trust these leaders to do the right thing. As is, we have the largest trafficking going on in this country with kids. And what are they doing? Nothing. We have stuff going on in Hollywood. We have global elites who favor this type of garbage. What's happening to them? Nothing. So putting these laws into place, how much enforcement is going to be around it? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, why haven't they made a better effort before with this and prioritize it? It's because the people that are doing it are the very same people that are trying to put these laws around. I'm not saying that about Blumenthal, but we do know that there are quite a lot of politicians as well as wealthy people who prey on children. And that is a fact, but nobody wants to talk about it. But in any case, this is just my thoughts about it. I think that this opens the door for, the Trojan horse for, not only children, but now adults to be surveilled, right? So you look at it from that perspective, perhaps maybe parents need to do a better job of taking more accountability of controlling the online activity of their own children. They shouldn't leave it to the government to go ahead and dictate how long your child should be online, who they should be talking to, and monitoring their own personal space. I think that is a gross invasion of privacy. And then you have researchers like Jory Craig and Renee DiResta wanting to have access to this kind of information. No, especially since they've broken the public's trust with not only the election and what they were doing, and this is why they're all being sued, but also, what does that mean to our rights, our privacy, our thoughts? Those could have now serious repercussions, especially since we're all moving, or they're all forcing us towards this digital ID. I say no. I say, parents, you need to recognize that maybe Facebook is not all that it's cracked up to be. Maybe your children don't need to be on it. I mean, it's as simple as that. Do not give these tech platforms the control. And that's it. If they don't have your information, or if they don't have you using it, then they die as a business. So they need to either recognize that they need to do something, but if the government gets involved, then game over, in my humble opinion. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Such a fraud.